Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt, and you have found, or are continuing to listen to, which I'm very grateful for, Venus Unplugged, your virtual heartbreak hotel. So what do we do here on Thursdays morning, or whenever you want to download the episode? So we explore the archetype of Venus, shadow and light, through tales, fairy tales, and through whatever subject kind of pops up within me. So we are continuing with the story of Snow White, but I also had a thought right before I went on air, and that is to encourage, with the depth of my heart, have the courage, although you're terrified, to grow, to become, to discover what your soul or your heart or the true self may be interested in, the collective will not be interested in. That's our protection. Many years ago, when I first was studying with my esoteric teacher, and she would say, "Oh, no, you must study," because I was terrified. Why am I interested in these bizarre things? And she said, no, you don't understand. She said, because when you step out of the collective and you begin to study the things of your heart and your soul, you'll heal 7 generations before you and 7 generations to come. I thought, I'm lucky I'm getting up in the morning, let alone healing generations. And she would say it again and again, and in truth, I didn't understand it. But, of course, she was right. I was still a novice, which I loved being a novice. I never wanted to grow beyond her. So study those odd and interesting subject matters. Become who you are. Don't worry about the collective. You know, you'll be criticized today, but you'll be quoted tomorrow. I had an experience of that yesterday. I met with an old, actually childhood chum, right? And as we met, we hadn't seen one another in many, many years, something like 30. And we were going to a museum, and he was totally enthusiastic about sugar and not eating sugar and blah, blah, blah. You know, things I was talking about 30 years ago, and he thought I was totally strange. And my first reaction was like, wow, you know, I mean, when I was talking about the sugar blues, you thought I was just nuts, right? And then I thought, no. He is having such joy, the joy of discovery. And it would be ill-informed and bad-mannered and just simply unkind to say, well, I already know that. So my teacher's prediction, and this has happened to me many, many times, it was like one of those, you know, one of those people of the generations of the past. Because when we stand for what we are born to stand for, and it may take many, many years to discover what that secret self is or that true self is, we just simply move towards it. No noise, just go towards it. You're shifting your family structure, you're shifting your community, you're shifting your world, you're fulfilling your assignment, and you're planting evolutionary shifts and changes. So that's part of, in a sense, what Snow White is about. Snow White is a teaching tale of individuation. Individuation is the path towards wholeness. There are certain pathology or steps to individuation. They do not happen chronologically. The end can begin in the beginning, and the middle can be at the end. So these steps can come at various points in our life as fairy tales reveal. And a fairy tale is a teaching. Okay, every aspect of a fairy tale is an aspect of one person. the viewer. And what's very interesting about fairy tales is depending on what type you are, a thinking type, a feeling type, a sensate type, or an intuitive type, you're going to perceive the fairy tale from that mode. So it's pretty amazing. And that's why we have differences. It's like, that's how a thinking type feels it. So we left our little Snow White. The prince came along. Now notice the prince didn't have to have any act of heroism. He had no tasks. He found her. He paid the highest price, whatever he had, to the dwarfs. He just wanted to bring Snow White back. So there's no task there. But it's the servants who are carrying the glass coffin. Trip, Snow White, the apple that she has not digested. It's just stuck in her throat. Just so that it's also called the Adam's apple. So I guess when the Adam's apple is half poison, we can't speak our truths. Just a thought. And this begins to tell us that, or inform that, shadow and light, good and evil, are sidekicks. You can't have one without the other. And very often the evil informs the good, or the good informs the evil. The good can be naive, and the evil says, I know what to say to this person, and trick them right out of their truth. And it will say something like, well, what are they going to say? Who's this they? The they isn't divine. Only the divine is divine. So whatever they have to say has nothing to do. Because at the end of your incarnation, the lords of karma are going to ask you, so how'd you do? We gave you this gift. Did you apply them? Tell me about it. They're not going to punish you. Just want to hear your adventures for the gifts that you asked for. So Snow White trips, coughs out the apple, stuck her in her fifth chakra. And that's a pretty powerful image. So what's stuck in your fifth chakra that you've got to cough up in order to feel whole? The prince can't do it for you. No one else can do it for you. It's your word. It's your logos. Now, the prince in this particular fairy tale represents the new soul's potential. The prince is Snow White's animus. And the animus is the feminine aspect, the masculine aspect within women. Every woman has an animus. And that animus has both a dark and a light side, a shadow and a light. There is always opposition, which is why we cannot eliminate opposition. We will never reach wholeness without opposition. So a one-sided belief system of only wanting good or only wanting not good is never going to get you there. You have to have both in the room within yourself, and it's called the tension of the opposite, and that's the thing that the dynamic that makes us grow into consciousness. So the prince, he just knows that he has to be with Snow White. He loves her, dead or alive, sitting in the coffin, wants to look at her, wants to be, because he probably has a different fairy tale, a continuing fairy tale. She'll find that out after she marries him, what his tale is. And so he sees his anima figure, but she's in a coffin, a glass coffin, and he has to have her. So we know that creates a dynamic of 4, male, female, anima, animus. 4 is always the number of wholeness. It's one of the numbers of the codes. They're hints, so they're very important hints. They're not just creative imagination, which are hints too. So that's what begins to happen. So what we're looking at now is this whole concept of good and evil. And, evil remains in principle evil. A good act is not going to overcome evil. It's going to certainly show its other side. So we need to have both. It needs to fulfill its function. Evil, as in the evil stepmother, is fulfilling Snow White's destiny. Because without that, there'd be nothing to fight against. Without the trickery and poisonous behavior and tricks and intention. So in a sense, envy, which is what the evil stepmother is motivated by, when envy comes into your life, wake up. You're about ready to grow if you don't give in to it and serve it by being good. Very important to say no and not have to explain. No is no. So this is what's happening with the light and the dark aspects of life and this dramatic polarity and the paradox. And they're intrinsic to the path. If you don't have the opposite rocking somewhere, nothing's happening. You're one-sided. As the mirror tells. See, the mirror, which is the mirroring within ourselves, and just like, in the paradox of good and evil, or love and power, or that we need to see the dark phases of our love relationships as part of the greater whole. And when we can deal with them, the relationship is going to grow. Now, if we're in a relationship, any relationship, it doesn't have to be a marriage, it could be a friendship, it could be a work, where we just want to be one-sided, or we kind of surrender to someone's shadow behavior instead of saying, no, I'm not dealing with that. I'm standing up to that. I'm not choosing victimization. Now, you may not be able to fight a sadistic opponent, but you don't give in. You don't give up, and you don't give out. More cat than dog. Walk away if you need to. Disengage. Don't take it home. Do not have an inner dialogue. Write it out and burn the piece of paper. Do a symbolic act to get it out of you. You may still have the piece of the poisonous apple stuck in your throat. But there are things that you can do to not take that poison. One day you'll cough up the apple and you'll find your voice. And you'll say what you need to say. So we have left Snow White. She sits up, and so trips. The coffin opens. The poisonous apple pops out of her mouth, her fifth chakra. And then, here it says in the fairy tale, then it wasn't long until she opened her eyes, lifted the lid of the coffin, and sat up and was alive again. And says, "Oh God, where am I?" she cried joyfully. The king's son said, "You are with me." That's a very, very powerful statement. Because there's nothing more comforting, whether it be in a love relationship or mother-daughter or children, protected, or when someone just says, "It's okay, you're with me, it's cool. Sit next to me," and people calm down. Because they know what that means to their soul. So this part of the fairy tale, it's about meeting oneself in all forms. So she's in the coffin, and so that can be self-reflection, that can be self-criticism, that can be self-destruction. And it's paramount to all of our growths to have these different phases. And that's what she was doing in that coffin. And when the time came, which is always a magical moment, a time and space, okay, where she awakens. Same thing happens with us. We wake up one day and we're different. We just know it. We can't understand. And people will say, oh, did you get a haircut? Did you? No, changed your attitude. It's kind of like a secret, where you begin to recognize, like, wow, I'm me. And that thrills the divine when we discover that. So that's part of what we're looking at now. The logos, the word. Speak our word, speak our truth. And very often, meaningful speech is so important, particularly to women, because very often they find that being able to articulate what is most important to them is a very important adult achievement. Once again, this was probably last year when I was talking about the different Jung's typology. All right, there's a huge difference between feeling and emotion. Emotion is the action of an emotion of a feeling. The feeling is what we value. So when we speak, when we learn to speak what we value, not what we're emotional about, and we get this very, very confused, and we'll say, men don't want to talk about feelings. No, they don't want to talk about explosive emotions or sentimental stuff, some do, some don't, okay? But they will most likely talk about when you discover what you truly value and can speak from that authentic voice. They may not agree, but they will listen to what one values. Because it's in the valuing, because the value comes from the true self. Not an opinion. People are parrots. They parrot what other people say because it sounds good, it makes them feel good, and they even have outfits to match it. But when we speak from that place of knowing, not believing. Believing's different. You're still working on something. And it's not the knowing, well, I know this. It's not the knowing of opinion. It is the true depth of knowing. That you know something is true for you. You don't have to campaign for anybody else. You're not a missionary. So this is part of what Snow White was working on while she was in the death-like sleep. A death-like sleep can also be a depression. We go into the underworld. We go into depression. When it's worked unconsciously, and we don't identify it like, I am depressed, therefore that is who I am, but begin to say, oh, I am in a journey into the underworld. This is a different place. I'm beginning to see things. Now, of course, you can't always do that when you're feeling depressed, but you can write yourself a little note. Or you can write from that place, all right? So that could be the glass coffin. We're looking at the world, but we're not connected to it. But then we find our voice. And in that voice, frees us. So Snow White had to die to her old life, the life of innocence. Remember in the beginning, she was so good, Miss Whitey White. Too innocent, dangerous, sickening. Oh, please. You know something's going to happen when somebody's that good. Just like you know something's going to happen when somebody's evil. It's like, oh, this is not going to fare well. This is not going to work. Okay. And so she's at this point where she starts to develop when the prince comes along, who represents her inner prince, her animus, positive animus, not the negative one. She builds a proper soul connection to the self with a capital S, S-E-L-F. That's been made. And then Snow White can become the true bride. And that's a big part of the individuation process. That's a huge part of the images in alchemy. There are many false marriages, false brides. And then comes the true bride. The holy marriage is a great shift in consciousness. It's a marriage of the opposites, And then the third factor comes from that, which is one's wholeness. So all he needed to do was fall in love and was within reach of Snow White. So that means also when we are aware that there's a positive and a negative animist. See, the animist is trying to trick me. And the positive will tell you how to be in the world and protect you. The negative will give you a message from the witch. And we're often running and doing behavior that's hurting us, like not living our truth, or at least beginning to study it, or at least get people around us who mirror that truth until we're ready to have the holy marriage. So the truth in every fairy tale deals with this young maid who is going to move into the marriage and then into being queen. That's also what happens in our life. When we become queen, we are sovereign. We are self-ruled. And that's the ultimate in consciousness, and that is the ultimate in wholeness, because we know it's shadow and light, so we know we're always correcting, but we are the sovereign state. We are self-ruled. We are inner world, not the collective unconscious. Now we're all infected and affected by the collective unconscious, because that's what teaches us when we're kids. You got to do this and don't do that, and that kind of like helps us get along until we start questioning, like, why? I actually don't believe in that. That's not my truth. We don't have to start a war. We just step away from that. And we begin to go to our own path. We discover our mentors, and we discover the forbidden knowledge. We have to sin. We have to make a mistake. We have to walk away. We have to do something wrong in order to find the right way. So we're constantly living out this motif of fairy tales. And in this one, our innocence, which is dangerous. The queen wants her dead because she's too beautiful. And envy does hate goodness and beauty. She's sent into the forest. She meets the dwarf. She works there. She's tested 3 times. She falls for the trick 3 times. She winds up in a glass coffin. And then suddenly, at the appropriate hour, she's released. This can happen in a day. This can happen over 40 years. We don't know. And it happens again and again and again and again until we take the hint. We're always being given hints. Whether it's the little bird tells us stories, or we open a book, or we listen to a podcast, something is always there saying, "You, here I am. Don't be afraid to think that thought. It'll be okay." Very often, people are more afraid of being right than being wrong. Well, what if I really am gifted? Yeah, and? Well, then you're going to have to live your gift. Well, I don't know if I could do that. Well, guess what? Now you have to. See, once we know, once it's revealed, we got to live it. We can't ask the oracle, well, what should I do, or what are my talents and abilities, and then go, oh, that was nice, and that was very entertaining. And then the negative animus says, yeah, but you're a moron, so go to sleep, and they were wrong, so, you really can't do that. But you know what? Too late. You asked the question, you got the answer, live it. Also, whatever we begin to do at the age of 49 until we leave the planet, okay, that's actually we're preparing for our next lives, which is why so often people get a habit or something that they just, they're mad for. And it's like, well, am I supposed to work at it? Well, you can. but just study it, rejoice in it, because this is what you're going to come in doing. I tried partying, but I'm not so sure that's going to work fully. But I'm good at it. I am good at joy. Bringing it, having it, creating it. Very good at that. So this is part of what Snow White is teaching us. And the alternatives and what can happen. And her transformation and the progress we make. So if we honor our own inner sense of self and our own inner earth, our substance, the planet Earth will be honored. That's how we love Mother Earth. Because when we become conscious and can feel our own feminine values, there's no way we're going to offend her or anyone. And we need wisdom. We need Sophia. And wisdom isn't giving advice to people, although it can be. It is living with the depth of a truth, your own sovereignty, your own truth. So as we're about to see in the next and final chapter of Snow White, the choices Snow White makes with her sovereignty. Now, let's not us forget about the evil stepmother, right? Well, she's been kind of quiet, although she knows it didn't work. So here it says in the fairy tale, this is the Grimm version, okay, Grimm's fairy tales, which are more accurate. The Hans Christian Andersen, that has a lot of, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it has a lot of Christian morality, and, you know, fairy tales aren't about, they're about developmental, so it's your own morals. It's not the morals of being applied, which is what we're trying to get away from. Why does that rule, you know, it may not work for you, or it may not mirror. You know, one of Jung's biggest axioms is that the image, the gender that we're born into, so the feminine gender needs a feminine image or deity. The masculine needs a male. So just that there. I mean, you don't have to give up. You know, the male deity can and is your positive animus. But we need the feminine, and to know the truth of that, the goddesses and the Mother Earth, and Sophia and Magdalene, and, you know, all of those, and the Holy Mothers. We need both. So here, back at the ranch, or back at the castle, but Snow White's godless stepmother was invited, so to the feast. So that's the wedding feast. So the king's son and Snow White, who is a king's daughter, they're going to get married. So they're going to have the feast. That's the wedding feast. And when she had dressed herself in beautiful clothes, she stepped before the mirror and said, this chick doesn't give up, Christ. Mirror, mirror, here I stand. Who's the fairest in the land? And the mirror answered, Here, O queen, you are most fair. But the young queen is 1,000-fold beyond compare. Then the evil woman uttered a curse, and she became so terrified she didn't know what to do. So tune in for the next week, and we're going to find out what happens to the queen and who goes to the party, and it's interesting, and didn't plan it that way, but still happened beautifully. That next week is Holy Week. It's a week of transformation, of shadow and light. So go to my website, LorraineNeithardt.com, or Blog Talk Radio, or set up an appointment, whatever. It is a beautiful day here in New York, and I hope your inner world is as beautiful as this day is. Many blessings. Bye-bye. 10.